mathematical argument for God. Stephen Woodford's video, Craig's Mathematical Argument for God Debunked, is a decent critique of William Lane Craig's argument, but falls short of debunking it. Near the end of his video, Stephen says,
"Because of this, I can't help but knock the feeling that I'm missing something. So if any of you think that I am, then please do let me know and I'll make another video."
Well, I think Stephen's feelings serve him well, and in this video I hope to be able to explain 4 things that Stephen has missed. 1. Why mathematicians believe that maths is real. 2. Why fictionalism doesn't escape from the unreasonable effectiveness of maths to science. 3. Why most mathematicians and physicists hold that maths is intrinsic to the universe. 4. Why God is a better explanation for this than naturalism. Why mathematicians believe that maths is real. Today, mathematics and physics are so intertwined that you can't study physics without also studying mathematics. However, the origin of these two disciplines are quite different. Physics arose in the 17th century, when figures such as Galileo, Bacon, and Newton formulated mathematical models of a clockwork universe that obeys a set of universal laws. However, mathematics has a much older history. From the 6th to the 3rd century BC, Greek figures such as Euclid, Pythagoras, and Archimedes figured out many of the mathematical methods, axioms, and formulas that we use today. These early mathematicians, like those who study pure maths today, believe that they are discovering mathematical truths that are universal and eternal. In other words, they hold that mathematical objects are real and exist in a realm that is beyond our senses and is more real than the empirical world. Think about it. When you say 2 plus 2 equals 4, or state the sequence of prime numbers, you are stating absolute truths that are independent of human opinions. Yet these truths are not perceived by our senses, but by our minds. Pure mathematicians therefore believe that rather than making up new fictitious equations, they are discovering real truths that exist in another realm, much like Plato's realm of forms, or the mind of God. Here is mathematician George Chaitin and cosmologist Max Tegmark explaining this.
Every pure mathematician who really believes in the subject, in a way, their thoughts in the mind of God. I mean, where are these? Where is the subject? It's not here. So you believe in some invisible world, better than ours, purer. This is beginning to sound a little religious.
It's very important to not conflate the language of mathematics, which we do invent, with the structures of mathematics, which we discover. For example, when Plato and his contemporaries started getting really interested in how many regular 3-dimensional shapes there were with flat sides, they discovered that there were exactly 5 of them. The tetrahedron, the cube, the octahedron, the dodecahedron, and the icosahedron. And they invented the name. They were free to invent the name dodecahedron, for example, for one of them. They could have called it the schmodecahedron or the zodecahedron if they wanted, but they were not free to invent a 6th one. There is no 6th one. It just doesn't exist. This is a sentiment that most of my mathematicians friends also share. David Vogan at MIT, for example, has a beautiful poster he's put up on the wall of his office of E8. This mathematical structure he spent a decade of his life studying, and he would be really pissed at me if I insinuated that he just kind of made this up. He feels he's discovering it.
Most pure mathematicians are therefore called realists or Platonists. However, a small minority, called fictionalists, hold that maths is just a human construct. In his video, Stephen puts himself in the fictionist camp. Interestingly, Stephen acknowledges that mathematics is a non-physical entity.
Mathematical entities such as the aforementioned are non-physical and abstract, yes.
However, he then rejects the idea that maths is real, and argues instead that we created maths for humanly constructed purposes. Stephen calls himself a logicist. However, logicism is not a fictionalist position, but rather a reduction of maths to logic, which is also non-physical. Logicist Bertrand Russell, for example, held to the Platonic idea of a priori mathematical universals. The second thing Stephen has missed is why fictionalism doesn't escape from the unreasonable effectiveness of maths in science. Stephen seems to think that by denying that mathematics is real, he escapes Wigner's conclusion that the amazing applicability of maths to physics is unreasonable and a miracle. However, this is misplaced, since even if mathematics is a fiction, there is no good reason why it would apply to modern physics. Stephen's approach seems to be to paint a picture of maths as something that we can constantly change to fit new uses, saying,
mathematics works because that is precisely what we've designed it to do. So much so, in fact, that when it doesn't work, which is to say when it doesn't correlate with reality, we alter its axioms so that it does.
However, this is a fundamental misunderstanding of mathematics. Mathematical axioms do not change to fit new discoveries in physics. Rather, maths and physics exist in a symbiotic relationship wherein discoveries in physics open up new discoveries in mathematics, and discoveries in mathematics open up new discoveries in physics. When Newton discovered the law of gravity, he did not change existing mathematical axioms, as Stephen suggests, but rather discovered a new field of mathematics called calculus. Likewise, when Newton's theory of gravity was superseded by Einstein's, new fields of mathematics were needed, but calculus was not thrown out because it's still correct. Stephen rightly points out the origin of maths, saying,
the earliest signs of Homo sapiens exercising mathematics dates back at least 5,000 years to the kingdoms of Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt, in which arithmetic, algebra, and geometry were employed for the purposes of trade, commerce, astronomy, and taxation.
The strange thing for a fictionalist is that a discipline created for things like trade, commerce, and taxation, which are human constructs, is so applicable to the physical structure of the universe. Here is Stephen's answer.
The reason that mathematics is so unreasonably effective is the same reason that reason is so unreasonably effective. It's because 1, when it's not effective, we alter its axioms so that it is, and 2, the universe is fairly consistent, and so it's no surprise that the tools that we created for our own environment happen to be applicable to other environments.
Stephen's answer that the universe is quite consistent just doesn't grapple with the key issue of why a fictional system developed for something designed by humans should apply to something real and not designed by humans. Now let's turn to the third thing that Stephen has missed: why most mathematicians and physicists hold that maths is intrinsic to the universe. If we were only talking about the early application of maths to nature, such as counting the number of cycles of the moon and stars to construct calendars, then maths could be something that humans impose on the universe, rather than something that is intrinsic to it. However, the universe itself behaves according to elegant mathematical principles. For example, many mathematicians have noticed that numbers such as the golden ratio, which is closely connected to the Fibonacci sequence and used by humans in the greatest architecture, music, and aesthetically pleasing designs, is also found in extraordinarily diverse natural phenomena such as shells, flower heads, human faces, hurricanes, and spiral galaxies. These repeating occurrences of the golden ratio are just one small example of how the universe behaves mathematically. Here is theoretical physicist Robert Digraph talking about some other repeating patterns in nature.
Robert Wigner's famous comment about the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics. I understand the effectiveness of mathematics, but why is it unreasonable?
I think it's unreasonable to expect that a piece of mathematical technique will appear again and again, and often in places where we do not expect it. Like, for instance, periodic motion, the orbits of the planets, the math that came along with that. You can also apply it in atoms, in analyzing sound, even in fluctuations in economics. So every time...
What specific math is there?
So that would be the mathematics of Fourier transforms, of fluctuations and analyzing the spectrum. That's what we use
Different frequencies,
what we use to analyze sound. I think Wigner in his essay even makes the remark that all of these applications underlying is the circle. And so you see in many mathematical formulas, you see the Greek letter pi, which actually is about the ratio of a circumference and diameter of a circle. But often it's not at all obvious where these circles are. So math has this wonderful ability to pop up again and again and again. And sometimes they say nothing as useful as a great theory. And why this is the case, why actually mathematics is the natural language of nature and it's able to speak to so many different topics, I think it is a miracle, because you could argue that perhaps some of the applications are, our brain has been trained to see everyday phenomena. And therefore, we develop math to capture that. But then you go into these unknown territories. You go to subatomic physics, or you go to the very edge of the cosmos. And again, the same mathematical equations are working.
For physicists, the fact that maths is intrinsic to the universe means that it does have an independent reality in the way that mathematicians believe, since it is not something we impose on the universe with our minds, but rather something we discover. Here is mathematical physicist Roger Penrose explaining this.
Mathematics has been a subject which you can study for its own sake. It has its own life, in a sense. And certainly mathematicians view it this way. It's something out there which seems to have a reality independent of the reality, the ordinary kind of reality, like things like chairs and so on, which are what we normally think of as real. But, okay, the mathematical reality is something different. It's sometimes referred to as a Platonic world, a Platonic reality. And sometimes people have a lot of trouble thinking of that as real. I mean, philosophers worry about that and so on.
What would that mean, a Platonic reality?
Well, I think it's a different kind of reality from the reality of the physical world. I mean, I tend to think of there being different ways of looking at reality. There's the reality of our mental experience, which, okay, interrelates with the physical reality, but so then does the mathematical reality of this Platonic world, which gives reality to these notions. So if you like, mathematical facts, like there is no largest prime number, is it's something independent of ourselves. It's always been true. It didn't somehow become true as soon as somebody saw how to prove it. It's always been true. There are wonderful examples like
And it would have been true if nobody
if
ever
nobody had been
proved
around.
it.
Exactly, yes. And in a sense that had to be so, because if the physical world depended so precisely on these mathematical laws, I couldn't have known what to do in a certain sense if the mathematics hadn't already been there. I mean, it's not us that imposes this on the world. It's out there. Sometimes people think that, maybe the reason we have good mathematical laws of physics is that's the best way we can come to understand the world. But it's something more than that. It really is out there in the world.
It is important to understand that this is not a minority view, but rather how most physicists understand the universe, regardless of their position on God. On this point, Stephen played a clever trick by trying to paint this as a minority view. In Craig's video, he quoted physicist Paul Davies saying that scientists generally believe that mathematical relationships reflect real aspects of the physical world. Stephen attempted to refute this by showing a clip of Davies apparently owning the fact that this is a minority position. However, this is misleading, because if you watch this snippet in context, you see that Davies is talking about his conclusion that the human ability to comprehend mathematics, and therefore the universe, means that we are players in the great cosmic drama, and therefore have ultimate purpose, which is a different point altogether. Here is the clip in context.
It sounds a little bit mystical. It sounds like somehow we are meant to be here, or that we are players in the great cosmic drama in this very fundamental way. Yes, I think we are, and it's one of these facts that I regard as giving huge significance to human life. A lot of people think significance in human life is what I do in my daily life and living a good life, being a good person. And I think an even deeper significance is the fact that we are plugged in to that deep level of reality through mathematics.
And in that view, you are distinctly in the minority among at least the physicists and mathematicians and scientists that I know.
Right.
You don't deny that you're in that minority in that thinking, a place that you apparently like to inhabit.
Yes, I freely admit that most of my colleagues would not agree with me.
By suggesting that the idea that maths is intrinsic to the universe is almost exclusively the view of Christian physicist Paul Davies, Stephen seems to be trying to write it off as an outdated Christian idea. However, this is the dominant view of atheist physicists like Stephen Hawking, Roger Penrose and Edward Witten, as well as pantheists like Michio Kaku. Kaku holds that the universe was originally one equation, but was subsequently fragmented into the different equations we have today, saying,
Well, the laws of physics are so precise and beautiful and gorgeous because they all originate from one equation, which has a symmetry.
Edward Witten, often called the smartest physicist in the world today, has even gone so far as to say,
well, it's uncanny how powerful mathematics is in understanding physics. So I think Eugene Wigner had in mind the fact that, on the one hand, to understand the equations of physics, you need to know a surprising amount of rather sophisticated math. But on the other hand, the equations of physics are mathematically interesting. So mathematics is the language in which laws of physics are formulated and in terms of which they have to be studied.
So you're using your own term, uncanny.
Yes.
He said unreasonable.
Yes.
Slightly different, but why do you think it's uncanny?
Well, it's as if the universe had been created by a mathematician.
It is quite shocking that an atheist physicist such as Witten says that it is as if the universe was designed by a mathematician, and we will return to this point. If this realist view of mathematics as intrinsic to the universe is correct, then the effectiveness of maths to physics is still surprising, but in a different way than for fictionalists. For fictionalists, the shocking thing is that the universe behaves according to something we made up. But for realists, the shocking thing is that we discovered the language of the universe long before understanding how the universe works. This means that whether you are a mathematical realist or a mathematical fictionalist, the amazing effectiveness of mathematics in the natural sciences is, as Wigner said, unreasonable and demands a sufficient explanation. This brings us to the final point that Stephen fails to understand, which is why God is a better explanation for the effectiveness of maths than naturalism. In his video, Stephen accuses William Lane Craig of suggesting that Wigner was a theist. However, nothing could be further from the truth. Wigner was indeed an atheist, and Craig never suggests otherwise. The fact that Wigner, like Hawking, Penrose and Witten, was an atheist is what makes his paper about the effectiveness of maths being a miracle so surprising. Stephen tries to explain this away by claiming that by miracle, Wigner just meant extraordinarily welcome. However, this is not what miracle means, and Wigner was quite capable of expressing himself clearly. Stephen's argument here relies on the fact that Wigner also says that the human ability to string together 1,000 arguments without contradiction is a miracle. However, this ability, which also requires non-physical entities such as consciousness and reason, is also inexplicable by naturalism, which is the real meaning of the word miracle. Naturalism is the denial of any miracles or non-natural events, and this is why non-physical entities such as maths, reason, and consciousness cannot be explained naturalistically and are therefore miraculous. When Hawking says that by discovering the equation of a unified field theory, we will know the mind of God. When Wigner says that the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics is a miracle and a gift we neither understand nor deserve. And when Witten says it is as if the universe was designed by a mathematician, they sound like theists even though they are atheists. This means that even though they operate within a naturalistic paradigm that excludes God from science, their knowledge of the physical world, and particularly its mathematical structure, has driven them to talk as if the world was designed by God. Craig's contribution is to point out that the theistic view of reality is actually more in line with current thinking in physics than naturalism, since it provides a better explanation of why the universe functions as a mathematical construct. In my view, Stephen's critique of premise 1 of Craig's argument is valid, since there are other naturalistic ways to understand the unreasonable effectiveness of maths in the sciences than only God or a happy coincidence. Stephen's view that maths is an ever-changing fiction is one such view, as is Oppie's view that it is necessary.
It turns out that on this naturalistic theory there is an explanation. The explanation is that this stuff's necessary.
However, the more we discover about the mathematical nature of the universe, the more fictionalism seems inadequate, and necessity is really no explanation at all. Invoking necessity is valid when an event occurs as a result of a law of physics, such as an apple falling from a tree. However, there is no law that dictates that maths should be effective in the sciences. Invoking necessity, therefore, completely dodges the question and says, well, it just had to be this way. However, this begs the question, why does it have to be that way? Stephen suggests that God is a non-answer, saying,
God is a non-answer. It's the equivalent of because I said so.
However, in reality, saying it just had to be that way is the real non-answer, because it really is no explanation at all. God, on the other hand, is a better answer because it provides a sufficient cause for the phenomenon in question. If God exists, then the universe was designed by an omniscient mind who perfectly understands mathematics and built the universe on an orderly mathematical model. If this God also created humans in his image, then it provides a sufficient explanation for why human minds are able to comprehend mathematics and use it in the creative process, even before understanding how the universe works. Saying it just had to be that way is the real equivalent of because I said so, since it provides no explanation for the unreasonable effectiveness of maths, much less a sufficient one. For these reasons, I would like to offer the following revision of Craig's mathematical argument for God. 1. The effectiveness of mathematics in science is the result of either chance, necessity, or design. 2. The effectiveness of mathematics in science is not the result of chance or necessity. 3. Therefore, the effectiveness of mathematics in science is the result of design. 4. The effectiveness of mathematics in science is designed either by God or humans. 5. The effectiveness of mathematics in science is not designed by humans. 6. Therefore, God exists. Finally, Stephen's characterization of Isaac Newton, the original rational creationist, as someone who turned his mind off by invoking God is way off the mark. Newton's belief in a divine lawgiver is what drove him to search for the laws by which God governed the universe, and this led directly to the birth of physics. Newton did not invoke God to explain parts of the universe that he couldn't explain. Rather, he invoked God as the being who designed the universe according to a mathematical plan and governs it indirectly through a set of laws. Far from stalling progress, as Stephen alleges, Newton's theism was the necessary foundation upon which all his scientific and mathematical discoveries were built. This is Dan Stone, the Rational Creationist. Don't forget to subscribe, and please see my website swallowingtheredpill.com for more information.